I mean, Gary was just a flat out, no bones about it, transitional genius. There's no other way to put it. I mean, he did for games what Einstein did to physics, and it wasn't just games.
Gary Gygax was a novelist, game designer, entrepreneur, and visionary who lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and was the co-creator of the Dungeons & Dragons game in 1974. The game, D&D for short, was the first role-playing game ever, and as such was only the 7th type of tabletop game created by humanity. I mean, can we say who created chess or dice? No, of course not, but we can name the person who authored Dungeons & Dragons, and he did it in our lifetime in the United States in the little town of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
So I think the legacy of it is that it really spawned a whole new way of looking at gaming, a whole new way of looking at fantasy and science fiction in a participatory way. And that inspired filmmakers, video game makers, board game makers, people who made modules for this, people who created other role-playing games. It really exploded the possibilities, and it got tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people to look at gaming in a new way and to look at fantasy in a new way that they could participate in it personally and could enjoy it on a new level.
The game itself was born in Gary's little house at 330 Center Street in 1974. Since that time, the game has become a truly global phenomenon. An estimated 40 million people have played the game since it was created, and it's been translated into dozens of languages. The first company ever to produce role-playing games was also started in Lake Geneva by Gary Gygax in 1973. Tactical Studies Rules, or TSR for short, started out of Gary's friend Don Kay's home at 542 Sage Street, and Gary's house at 330 Center Street, and in 1976, moved to 723 William Street with 10 employees. The wild success of D&D grew the company until they moved into the Hotel Claire building on Broad Street in Maine with 100 employees. Ultimately, TSR employed over 400 people and resided in the business complex on Sheridan Springs Road for the next several years. Gary also founded the largest tabletop gaming convention in North America, naming it Geneva Convention, or Gen Con. He ran the very first Gen Con at Horticultural Hall in 1968, again in his hometown of Lake Geneva.
But we're getting a big boost here from an interest in chess. We get chess players who get a little tired of the stereotype situations of chess. We get people who are interested in fantasy and like to get into fantasy wargaming. And there seems to be a growing interest in history too. And people that are interested in history like to get into this.
As it grew, it expanded to the American Legion Hall, then to the Lake Geneva Playboy Club in 1977, until it grew beyond the little town. It now has an attendance of 85,000 gamers and is a major source of income for the city of Indianapolis every summer. Gary became a best-selling novelist in the mid-1980s, achieving that distinction several times, and did his writing at Stone Manor, where he resided.
So he wanted to be a fantasy fiction writer, as well as a game designer.
When he started TSR as a game company, Gary started engendering this desire to publish fantasy fiction from Lake Geneva. And this opened up the door for TSR to begin publishing other novels. So as TSR grew, their publication of fantasy fiction grew. Cities and towns all over the world base their entire economy upon their most famous sons, authors among them. Certainly, Lake Geneva is famous for Gary Gygax. Tens of millions of fans worldwide have read his works and played Dungeons & Dragons, and they flock to Lake Geneva yearly in March to attend GaryCon. They know Lake Geneva is the birthplace of their beloved hobby and the hometown of their favorite fantasy author, and yet the town has little to no recognition of this. At most, fans can only drive past his house where he created D&D, or set some gaming dice upon the engraved stone at the Riviera Fountain. So while tens of millions of players play D&D and experience fantasy through that, hundreds of millions of people read novels that came out of this little town in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. As Gary continued to design games and author novels, he quietly settled into his final Lake Geneva home at 316 Madison Street, where he passed away in 2008.